The bully slapped a 12-year-old black boy in a diner, not knowing that his father was a mafia boss. The slap echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Miguel's face, only 12 years old, turned to the side with the force of the blow as his school backpack fell to the dirty tile floor. Coins rolled in all directions. "Learn to walk straight, kid," shouted Derek Thompson, 16, who stood 6 feet tall. His fists were still clenched, the gold football team ring leaving a red mark on the child's cheek. Fat Tony's Burger was the kind of place where students stopped after school. Cheap, noisy, and with little supervision from the staff. Derek had ruled that territory for 2 years, charging protection money from the younger kids and always finding reasons to humiliate those he considered inferior. Miguel slowly got up, touching his bruised face. His dark eyes showed no fear, something that should have alerted Derek, but the bully was too busy showing off to his friends who were laughing at the nearby tables. "Sorry," Miguel muttered, starting to gather his scattered coins. It was the snack money his grandmother had given him that morning, carefully counted to last the whole week. "Sorry, doesn't pay for my sneakers you stepped on," Derek kicked the coins away. "You know how much these cost? More than your whole house, I bet." The other teenagers laughed louder. Phones came out of pockets. Nothing like humiliating someone and still getting likes on Instagram. What none of them noticed was Miguel discreetly turning on the recorder on his cell phone and sliding the device under a nearby table. The employee behind the counter, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, hesitated for a moment. Derek was the son of an important local businessman. Miguel was just another poor kid from the neighborhood. She lowered her eyes and pretended not to see. "My dad always says the people like you need to learn to respect people like us," Derek continued, pushing Miguel against the wall. "Maybe a harsher lesson will teach you some manners." That's when Miguel did something unexpected. Instead of crying or begging, he looked Derek straight in the eye and said with disturbing calm, "My dad also teaches me about respect and about consequences." Derek laughed. "Your father? What father? I bet you don't even have one, like most." The sentence died in the air when Miguel finished. "Vincenzo Torino. Maybe you know the name." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Derek, with all his teenage arrogance, had grown up hearing whispers about the Torino family. Stories told in hushed tones in the city's bars, businesses that ran without interference, problems that simply disappeared. But Derek was too far gone to back down now, especially with everyone filming. "Liar!" he growled, but his voice betrayed a note of uncertainty. Miguel just smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes and made him look years older than his 12 years. "Dad always says that family is sacred, and that whoever messes with family, well, you'll find out." As Derek processed those words, Miguel calmly picked up his cell phone, checked that the recording was perfect, and put the device away. His movements were precise, calculated, far too mature for a child who had just been assaulted. The cafeteria remained deathly silent. Derek looked around, realizing for the first time that he might have just made the biggest mistake of his privileged teenage life. If you're enjoying this story of how an arrogant bully is about to discover that he completely underestimated his victim, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what comes next will show that some lessons in respect cost much more than a simple apology. Derek Thompson wasn't just your average bully. He was the product of a family that had learned to use power and influence to get what they wanted. In the 3 days following the incident at Fat Tony's, he set about turning Miguel's school life into a calculated hell. "Hey, Torino!" Derek shouted down the hallway of Lincoln High School, deliberately pronouncing the surname with contempt. "Your Mafia daddy ain't gonna protect you in here." Miguel continued walking calmly toward his math class, ignoring the laughter of Derek's friends. His backpack had mysteriously disappeared from his locker for the 3rd time that week, and someone had stuck an offensive note in his desk. What Derek didn't realize was that Miguel photographed every incident, wrote down every date, cataloged every witness. At 12, he had already learned from his father that documentation was power, and power well used was justice. Thompson is testing boundaries, Miguel muttered on the phone during lunch, sitting alone on the patio. Dad always says that small fish make a lot of noise before they get caught. On the other end of the line, Vincenzo Torino's deep, calm voice replied, Son, sometimes you have to let people like that hang themselves with their own rope. Keep watching, keep learning. On Thursday afternoon, Derek decided to escalate things even further. During gym class, he orchestrated an accident where Miguel was elbowed in the stomach during a basketball game. The teacher, Coach Williams, who knew very well who Derek's father was in the community, pretended not to see. Watch your step, Torino, Derek whispered as Miguel recovered on the floor. Accidents happen when you don't know your place. But it was on Friday that Derek made his fatal mistake. During recess, he and 4 friends surrounded Miguel near the bathrooms, away from the security cameras. It was the perfect place for humiliation, without official witnesses. You know what, Torino? Derek pushed Miguel against the wall. I'm tired of your Mafia stories. My dad knows everyone important in this town. If your family was really dangerous, I would have heard about it. Miguel looked Derek straight in the eye, with the same unsettling calm as always. Maybe you don't know the right people to hear the right stories. Liar! Derek clenched his fist. I bet your father doesn't even exist, just like most. Be careful what you say next, Miguel interrupted, his voice low, but laden with an authority that shouldn't exist in a 12-year-old. Derek hesitated for a microsecond, then regained his bravado. Or what are you going to call your imaginary daddy? Then Miguel did something completely unexpected. Instead of backing down or protesting, he smiled and pulled out his cell phone. Actually, good idea, Miguel. The voice that answered was instantly recognizable. Deep, controlled, with a subtle Italian accent that the whole town knew from local news reports about successful businessman Vincenzo Torino. Hi, Dad. I'm here with Derek Thompson. You remember I told you about him? Derek and his friends recoiled involuntarily. That voice on the phone, they knew it. Everyone in town knew it. Oh yes, the Thompson boy. The voice paused. Son of the real estate developer, right? Interesting family. Give him the phone. Miguel handed the phone to Derek, who was visibly pale. He wants to talk to you. Derek took the phone with trembling hands. Hello, Derek Thompson? The voice wasn't threatening. It was worse. It was polite, calm, almost friendly. I hear you and my son have had some misunderstandings. Sir, we were just... Let me explain something about family, kid. In my culture, family is sacred. When someone messes with my family, it becomes my personal problem. Derek swallowed hard. In the background, his friends began to discreetly move away. Now, I'm sure this was just a misunderstanding between young people, but I want you to understand one thing very clearly. My son, Miguel, is polite, respectful, intelligent. He doesn't look for trouble. But I solve problems. It's been my specialty for many years. Why, yes, sir, I understand. Good. Give the phone back to Miguel. Derek handed the phone back as if it were burning. Miguel spoke briefly with his father in Italian, then hung up. He enjoyed talking to you. Dad always says it's important to get to know the families of my schoolmates. That night, Derek Thompson found it impossible to sleep. Every shadow in the window, every noise in the street made his heart race. He had grown up hearing whispers about the Torino family, businesses that never failed, competitors who simply disappeared from the market, authorities who never asked questions, and he had assaulted, humiliated, and threatened the son of the man everyone respected or feared too much to mention aloud. Miguel, on the other hand, slept peacefully, as he always did when he knew the pieces were moving exactly where they should be. On Saturday morning, Derek's father received an unexpected call. Thompson, Vincenzo Torino here. I hear our sons met at school. How about we talk about this in person? I have some ideas about how our boys can get along better. The meeting was scheduled for Monday.
Derek spent the entire weekend wondering what that conversation could mean for his family. Each new humiliation Derek had imposed only strengthened something inside Miguel that the bully couldn't see, a silent strength fueled by the very injustice they were trying to impose. What that privileged teenager didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing his own sentence, and that on Monday he would discover that messing with the wrong family has consequences that go far beyond the school walls. Monday arrived like a sentence. Derek Thompson had spent the entire weekend imagining increasingly terrifying scenarios about what that meeting with Vincenzo Torino could mean for his family. At 8:30 a.m., he arrived at school with deep, dark circles under his eyes, constantly looking over his shoulder. Every dark car that drove down the street made his heart race. Miguel, on the other hand, entered the courtyard of Lincoln High School with his usual calm, politely greeting the teachers and organizing his books in his locker with military precision. "Thompson," Principal Peterson's voice echoed down the hallway. "My office, now." Derek felt his legs buckle. Was it about the meeting? About the assaults? About something worse? In the office, Peterson closed the door with a serious expression. "Your father called me. He said you and Miguel Torino had some disagreements. Would you like to explain what happened?" Derek swallowed hard. How could he explain that he had threatened and assaulted the son of one of the most feared men in the town? It was just a silly argument, sir." "An argument that resulted in you hitting him?" Peterson opened a folder. "Because we have witnesses, Derek, and videos." It was then that Derek realized the extent of the problem. Miguel hadn't just recorded the phone conversation with his father, he had documented everything. Every push, every insult, every humiliation of the last few days was recorded and organized like a professional dossier. "Look, Derek," Peterson, "you're a good student, but this—" He showed screenshots of messages Derek had sent to friends mocking Miguel. "This is systematic bullying, and against a minor." The messages had been captured and printed with the date and time. Miguel had created a complete file of Derek's actions, including statements from other students who had witnessed the attacks. "How did he get these messages?" Derek whispered, horrified. "Apparently, some of your friends decided to cooperate when they found out who Miguel's father was."
Peterson closed the folder. 3 days suspension and you will apologize publicly. As Derek left the office, completely devastated, Miguel was in the library quietly working on a science project. But it wasn't a typical school project. It was a detailed presentation on how technology can be used to document injustice. That's when Ms. Rodriguez, the librarian, approached him. "Miguel, your Uncle Vincent is here to see you." Vincenzo Torino looked nothing like what Derek would expect from someone in the family. Tall, elegant, wearing a discreet suit and carrying a leather briefcase, he looked more like a successful lawyer than any Mafia stereotype. "Ciao, nipote." Vincent kissed Miguel's head affectionately. "Dad told me about your problem at school." "It's not a problem anymore, Zio Vincent," Miguel replied in fluent Italian. "It's being resolved." Vincent smiled proudly. "Your father wants you to learn that there are many ways to resolve conflicts. Some are more educational than others." In the teacher's lounge, news of Vincent Torino's visit spread like wildfire. Everyone knew who the Torino family was, even if they never spoke about it openly. Some whispered about generous contributions to school projects. Others mentioned how discipline problems involving certain families simply disappeared. Coach Williams, who had purposely ignored the aggression during physical education, suddenly remembered witnessing possible irregularities in the games. Dolores from Fat Tony's called the school offering to be a witness to the original incident. At 3:30 p.m., Richard Thompson arrived at the school driving his BMW, his face tense and his hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Vincenzo Torino was already waiting in the parking lot, leaning against an immaculate black Cadillac, calmly reading an Italian newspaper. "Mr. Thompson," Vincenzo greeted him politely, folding the newspaper with military precision. "Thank you for coming." Richard tried to maintain the businesslike composure that had always worked in his real estate negotiations. "Mr. Torino, I'm sure we can resolve this like civilized men." "Of course," Vincenzo smiled. "Let's talk in my office. It's more private." For the next 20 minutes, students and school staff noticed Richard Thompson getting out of the Cadillac with a deathly pallor and visibly trembling hands. He walked straight to where Derek was waiting, his eyes avoiding eye contact with anyone. "We're moving," Richard whispered to his son, "at the end of the month." "Dad? What happened? What did he say to you?" Richard looked around, paranoid, then pulled Derek into a secluded corner. "He showed me photos, son. Photos of all our properties, our house, your class schedules. He knew where your mother shops, where I have lunch, even the name of our dog's veterinarian." Derek felt his blood run cold. "But he didn't make any threats, did he, Dad?" "He didn't need to." Richard ran his hand nervously through his hair. "He just said that family is important to him, and that I hoped you would teach you the value of respecting other families." While father and son talked desperately, Miguel calmly organized his books in the closet. Vincenzo had left school, but not before handing Miguel a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a new cell phone, not a regular smartphone, but something clearly more sophisticated. A handwritten note in Italian read, "To document your education. With love, Zio Vincent." That evening, Miguel sat down at the dinner table with his parents in their modest but impeccably organized home. His mother, Isabella, served homemade lasagna while Vincenzo read emails on his tablet. "Dad," Miguel said calmly, "Derek Thompson is moving out at the end of the month." Vincenzo looked at his son over his reading glasses. "And how do you know that?" "Because I've learned that when you plant the right seeds, you can predict exactly when and how they will grow." Isabella stopped serving. Impressed by the maturity of her son's words, Vincenzo slowly closed his tablet. "You're learning, Miguel. But remember, real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about making them respect you for who you are, not who your father is." "I know, Dad." "That's why Derek Thompson doesn't know the most important part yet." "What part?" Miguel smiled, not a child's smile, but something much more calculated. "That I documented everything, not just to protect myself. I documented it to protect his next victims." In Miguel's carefully organized school folder, there was evidence of at least 8 other students Derek had bullied over the past 2 years. Names, dates, witnesses, even recorded conversations where Derek bragged about his actions. "Tomorrow," Miguel continued, "I'm going to hand all of this over to the student council. Not as Miguel Torino, son of Vincenzo, but as Miguel Torino, a student who refuses to let others go through what I went through." Vincenzo leaned back in his chair, a mixture of pride and concern in his eyes. His 12-year-old son was demonstrating not only strategic intelligence, but something much more rare, a sense of justice that went beyond personal revenge. The next day, Derek arrived at school to find that his transfer had been expedited, but he also discovered something much worse. A presentation was being prepared by the student council on patterns of toxic behavior at school, and his name appeared on almost every slide. Miguel had turned his own victimization into a systematic campaign against bullying at Lincoln High School. Every documented assault, every organized witness, every piece of evidence cataloged with the precision of someone who had learned from an early age that documentation is power. Derek realized too late that he had not only been defeated, he had been completely outmaneuvered by a mind far more brilliant than his own. A mind that had turned suffering into strategy, humiliation into education, and personal revenge into collective justice. While Derek packed his bags for the forced move, Miguel prepared something that would change not only his own life, but the lives of dozens of other students who would finally have a voice. What no one knew yet was that this anti-bullying campaign was only the first step in a much larger plan,
a plan that would prove that age does not determine wisdom, and that sometimes true leadership emerges exactly where we least expect to find it. The student council presentation on Thursday morning attracted an audience that no one had expected. The Lincoln High School auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, and even a few members of the local press who had been discreetly invited. Miguel took the stage carrying a laptop and a projector, wearing his impeccably ironed school shirt and moving with a quiet confidence he had learned from watching his father at business meetings. My name is Miguel Torino, and today I'm going to present a project on patterns of toxic behavior in educational environments. His voice was clear, professional, nothing like that of a traumatized 12-year-old. Derek Thompson was sitting in the third row, forced to attend by order of the principal as part of his educational suspension. His hands sweated as he watched Miguel connect the projector cables with military precision. The first image that appeared on the screen made the entire auditorium whisper collectively. It was a detailed timeline of the last 2 years, showing dozens of incidents of bullying at the school, organized by date, aggressor, and victim. Over the course of 24 months, I have systematically documented 47 cases of intimidation, physical assault, and psychological humiliation at the school, Miguel began, his voice echoing through the sound system. Derek Thompson is physically assaulting 11-year-old Kevin Martinez in September 2023.
The video began to play, filmed discreetly by another student, showing Derek pushing the smaller boy against the lockers and stealing his lunch money. This is Derek Thompson, publicly humiliating Lisa Chan for not speaking perfect English in October 2023. Another video, this time showing Derek crudely mimicking the girl's accent while others laughed. With each new piece of evidence presented, Derek sank further into his chair. Around him, parents and students began to look his way with expressions of revulsion and disbelief. Here we have text messages where Derek Thompson brags about his actions. Miguel projected screenshots of WhatsApp conversations where Derek bragged to friends, "Today I taught another brat not to cross my path. These guys need to learn who's boss here." Derek's mother, sitting in the front row, covered her face with her hands. His father, Richard Thompson, was visibly pale, realizing that the problem was much bigger than a schoolyard fight. But Miguel was just getting started. "What I discovered through this investigation," Miguel continued with the coldness of an experienced prosecutor, "is that this behavior was not isolated. It was systematic, coordinated, and most importantly, deliberately ignored by the school administration." The next slide showed emails between Derek and other students, planning operations to humiliate specific targets. There was even a list with names of victims and recommended methods for each one. "Coach Williams," Miguel looked directly at the physical education teacher. "You witnessed at least 12 physical assaults during your classes and chose not to intervene in any of them. I have witnesses and videos of each incident right here." Williams tried to stand up to protest, but the evidence was irrefutable. Miguel projected videos from the gym security camera, clearly showing the assaults taking place while Williams looked the other way. "Dolores Santos, employee at Fat Tony's Burger," Miguel continued. "You admitted on tape that you knew about Derek's aggressive behavior, but chose not to report it because he was the son of an important family." The audio recording began to play throughout the room. Dolores's voice clearly saying, "Look, I know the Thompson kid is trouble, but his dad has influence. Better not mess with that." Derek tried to get up to leave, but found that it would be impossible. Vincenzo Torino had arrived at the auditorium 5 minutes earlier, strategically positioning himself near the door, not to intimidate, just to observe his son's education. 2 men in discreet suits flanked the other exits. Finally, Miguel reached the climax of his presentation. We have last Monday's incident at Fat Tony's Burger, where Derek Thompson physically assaulted me in front of multiple witnesses. Tony's original video began to play on the big screen. Every slap, every racist word, every moment of humiliation was reproduced in high definition for the entire auditorium to see. But then, Miguel did something no one expected. He paused the video at the exact moment Derek hit him and turned to the audience. Do you know what my first reaction was when this happened? It wasn't anger. It was sadness. Sadness because I realized that Derek Thompson is a product of a system that teaches privileged children that they can treat other human beings like objects. Derek was visibly shaking now. Tears of humiliation streamed down his face as hundreds of people watched him. But this presentation isn't about Derek Thompson, Miguel continued, his voice soft but relentless. It's about all of us, about how a community can choose between protecting violent privileged people or protecting defenseless children. Miguel projected the final slide, a photo of each of Derek's 23 victims over 2 years with their names and ages. Children aged 10 to 14 who had suffered in silence while adults looked the other way. Derek Thompson destroyed the self-esteem of 23 children. He stole lunch money from at least 15 students. He caused trauma that some of these children will carry with them forever. And all of this was allowed because he had the right last name and the right parents. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Derek was completely broken, sobbing uncontrollably while his mother tried to comfort him. Richard Thompson stared at the floor, realizing that the family's reputation was destroyed forever. My proposal is simple. Zero tolerance for bullying, regardless of last name. Mandatory training for staff on how to identify and report aggression. And most importantly, a support program for victims who have been silenced for too long. The ovation was spontaneous and deafening. Students stood up, parents applauded, teachers nodded in approval. Miguel had turned his personal humiliation into an educational revolution. Derek Thompson tried to hide behind his mother, but it was too late. Phones captured every second of his shame. In a few hours, he would be known nationally not as a powerful bully, but as the coward who attacked children and cried when confronted with the truth. As the Thompson family hurried out of the auditorium, Miguel stepped off the stage to be greeted by dozens of students and parents. Vincenzo watched from the back of the room, a discreet smile of pride on his face. Derek had learned a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. When you choose to humiliate someone you consider weaker, there is always the possibility that that person is much stronger than you ever imagined. And sometimes, the consequences of our choices come packaged with a lesson of dignity that cuts deeper than any physical aggression ever could. The question that remained was not whether Derek would survive the public humiliation, but whether he would find a way to become a better person after having his true nature exposed for the whole world to see. 3 months later, Lincoln High School was unrecognizable. Miguel had become student council president by unanimous vote, leading an anti-bullying program that attracted national attention. Derek Thompson never recovered from the public humiliation. His family moved to another state, but the videos of the presentation followed him. Universities rejected his applications when they discovered his history. Summer jobs evaporated when employers Googled his name. Miguel, on the other hand, received full scholarships from 5 prestigious universities. His Document to Protect campaign spread to 200 schools in 12 states. Dad always said that the best revenge is success, Miguel explained to a CNN documentary about bullying. I didn't destroy Derek Thompson, I just showed who he really was. Vincenzo watched proudly from the audience during his son's graduation. Miguel received 3 awards: academic merit, community leadership, and civil courage. Derek watched the ceremony on YouTube from his new school where no one knew his past. Still, every time he saw a child being bullied, he remembered Miguel's words. Family is sacred. The lesson was simple. Underestimating someone based on appearances is the first step to your own downfall. If this story of how a child turned humiliation into leadership has inspired you, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes heroes wear school uniforms and carry backpacks, proving that dignity has no age and justice waits for no one to grow.